All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Midwest Star Wars Fanatics Live. We have a special episode tonight. We have a special guest here. Before we get into that, I want to say thank you to our sponsors, and that is TRG Toys Collectibles. You can check them out, trgtoys.com. And also, you can follow Travis and myself over at the Hashtag Show, hashtagshow.com, and on social media as well. But again, we have a special guest tonight. Anybody who is a fan of Boba Fett probably knows this guy. He's been around to a few conventions. I know we've seen him in Nashville. We've seen him in Texas. We've seen him all over the place. A New Hope special edition, Boba Fett, Mark Anthony Austin. Welcome, Mark. Glad to have you.
Good to be here, man.
All right. So, everybody, we're going to talk some fun tonight. We're going to talk about Mark's history with Star Wars and Boba Fett, and then we're going to talk about what everybody wants to hear is what his thoughts are on some of the new series and obviously the book of Boba Fett, which should be a pretty interesting discussion. Especially with some know how some of us feel about it as well. But Mark, we to jump in right away, we got to see you in A New Hope as Boba Fett, which, is obviously the special edition, which is cool that they brought him in, especially being one of our favorite characters. But before we get into that and we learn of this, like, how did you get into the acting and how did you get into the Star Wars, world?
It's, but I'll condense it into a really short story. I just coincidentally bumped into a friend of mine that I'd met one time in London on my very first day at ILM. And it was like, oh my God, I just saw you a couple of months ago in London. And he goes, oh, you're working here? And I said, yes, I'm starting on Monday. I'd gone in on the Saturday before I started. Oh, I know Don Bees. I can get you into the archives. And I'm like, oh my God. I'd just love to see or smell or touch that focus. I just want to be close. I want to be as close to it as I could get. And so I was like, oh yes, I'd love to go to the archives. And sure enough, he came through and he took me to the archives, and I was like a kid in Charlie's Chocolate Factory. I was like one of those kids. I sat in a land speeder. I put Indiana Jones jacket and a hat on. There was all the Boba Fett suit on this big table. I posted a picture of me ogling it because I was like, it's like the Ark of the Covenant for me. I was like looking at this suit all strewn out over this table, and they were taking inventory on it. So I just couldn't believe I had come that close to the suit.
So it's pretty much busted open that case from the warehouse from Indiana Jones, and it's just all, just all Star Wars and just all that great stuff.
Loads of great stuff. All the R2-D2s, the R2-D2 with the black coloration for all the blue screen shots, the one in the back of the X-Wing, the giant Star Destroyer tail that the Millennium Falcon was on, just stuff everywhere. It's like, I had to drag me out like claws, like scraping the floor, drag me out at the end of it. And I spent a good hour and a half in there. And they just said, oh, just have fun and look at good stuff. The thermal detonator. Oh my God. So anyway, as I left, I said to Don, like, oh my God, you have made my dream come true. Like, this is beyond winning the lottery for me. So thank you for giving me just that experience. He goes, oh, you can come back anytime. If you want to come back anytime, you can come back. I was like, no, I will take you up on this.
And open invitation to say anytime.
So I had to go back, and when I made any excuse to go back, he said, just call me in advance. So I called him up and go along to archives. I just poured through that stuff. Look at all the little maquettes of cantina creatures that weren't used, and just stuff everywhere. So anyway, I'm friends with Don at this point. I've seen him a number of times, spent a number of times at the archives, and suddenly they put out an email at ILM. Who wants to be a stormtrooper? Well, they had like 150 or 165 replies for yes, So I put my name in. I thought, it's a lottery. I got to chuck my name in to see what happens. Chuck my name in. And like maybe a couple of days later, Don called me And he goes, I'm sorry to say you're not going to be a stormtrooper. No. I'm too short, aren't I? I'm too short. I'm like Luke, aren't I? And so he said, he goes, no. He goes, there might be another character that you might particularly be interested in. I was like, no. He's like, yeah. Because they're doing a summit at the ranch. That's why they asked for volunteers. They wanted to have a theater show. And, Andrew C. Nelson, I always say his name wrong. He was Darth Vader.
Mm-hmm.
Stormtroopers come down. This is after they show the new trailers. All the Kenner toys are in there. All the license holders in the theater. Stormtroopers come down the side. Darth Vader comes out. Oh my God! They're going nuts. Darth Vader says, "We will be honored if you join us," and tells them to file out, and they have to file out past all these stormtroopers, and they check their tickets with another couple of stormtroopers. They open up these curtains, and they go into what they wanted to open up to now was they go into the cantina, all like black curtains all around the sound stage, cantina reconstructed in the middle, all kind of like dry ice and foggy everywhere. Band playing in the corner. In the corner. There's a land speeder park. There's the droids, but they're not moving. They're the only ones not moving. Otherwise, the cantina is packed full of aliens. And so he's like, we want another character to be patrolling the Mos Eisley cantina that night. I was like, oh, please, I have to do it. And he goes, well, if you don't fit the flight suit, then you can't. So come along and try the flight suit on. So I said, I'll come tomorrow. So I came the next day, went straight down there, and they put the flight suit on, and the zipper was going up, and it was like, God rays coming through the ceiling, and I heard it was like Cinderella putting the slipper on. It was like, oh, and it went up, and I was like, oh, yes. I put my arms out, and it was like a total Jeremy Bullock fit. Yes. I just was like, that was it. And I said, well, while you're here, because we just did the inventory check, let's just make sure we got all the armor pieces and remember how to put it on properly. I'm like, oh. So they all suited me up like Iron Man. Oh my God. I felt like I won the pools twice. Like now I was wearing the armor and I was going to wear it for this convention. They said it's going to be 4 hours. Is that okay? Sure. 4 hours, yes. And so I went to the summit. It was in the evening. I went after work, and they suited us all up and everything. And there was someone, as they put it on, they were crossing it off a list, because when they took it off, they crossed off the list, putting it back. Someone checking stuff as it's coming out. It's all being put on. And I'd already put it on once before, so I was kind of, no, it's got to go there. They still had the bells the wrong way around, though. The bells were around the wrong way, even at this point. This is way before any idea of there's ever going to be a blue screen shoot.
Yeah.
Bells are wrong, but I don't care. Just get me out there. I want to get into the cantina. So they suit me up. And off I went, and they go through these double doors, and suddenly you're in the cantina, and it's like aliens and humans. The humans actually drinking real drinks at the bar. Aliens are pretending to drink at bars, are walking around or looking shady. And all I had to do is like patrol the bar. So I was like walking in and out and giving an alien a stare, and they kind of shrink away and stuff. It was like the best experience ever. Like someone, they'd gone to all this length just to entertain a fantasy of mine. That's how it felt. It felt like I was tripping. It felt like this couldn't be real. Like this is nuts. So whenever anyone asks me about the best time in the suit, this is the best time. This is better than the blue screen shoot. This having the cantina band playing, and they played all 3 songs. They played all the Java songs as well.
Nice. But little did you know during this time that this was going to be an opportunity for you to,
So I'm wearing the suit. I'm the guy that now fits the suit, because they'd had such success from this summit that they said, would you mind doing a second one? So I said, no, another 4 hours in the suit. And even when the 4 hours was over, no one got out of their costumes. Everyone was dancing. They put music on for about an hour, and I was dancing with Ula all night. Mm-hmm. And anyway, so I had those like 10 hours wearing this suit. It was like the best. And that was over. So I went back to my job working on Casper, which I was. And it was kind of like November-ish, November of 94, this is. And Steve Williams came up to me at my desk. You know, Spaz Williams. Steve Williams came up to my desk, and it was late. It was like end of the day. And he said, he goes, oh, no, it wasn't. Sorry, it wasn't Steve Williams. It was Carl Miller, the cameraman. Steve Williams comes later. Carl Miller, he said, you know, I don't know if you, I didn't tell you this, but they need someone to jump in the suit for a blue screen shoot for the special edition. You should tell them that you just did those 2 summits. Tell them you fit the suit. Write an email to Tom Kennedy, the producer. Go on, do it. I was like, okay. So cheekily, I wrote an email talking about it. Said, little bird told me. That's what I said. Blah, 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 blah. Fit the suit, blah, blah, blah. I would love to do it if you need any help, blah, blah, blah. Send. And I got this email back saying, furious, like, how did you get this information? Went off. So I was like, oh no, I ruined it.
Whoops.
So then I'm thinking I've ruined my chances now. And I thought I came really close though. And then that's when Steve Williams came up to my desk and he said, oh, I just heard that they're going to use you for the blue screen shoot. I said, really? He goes, oh, they haven't told you yet? No? Okay, well, I never told you. And he went off. So I was like, it wasn't official. So he could be winding me up. You know, we were friends. And we were friends that would wind each other up. So I was like, I don't know whether to believe him or not. I didn't want to tell anyone in case I was wrong. And there's only when I got the email saying, you know, would you like to do it? That it was official. And yeah, I just couldn't believe I won the lottery, like, I don't know, multiple times at this point.
So,
just,
I mean,
yeah.
Just thinking that you're going to be stepping in the role, you know, Jeremy, you know, a legend, you know, in the making. And with Boba Fett, with a character that hasn't, I mean, yeah, he didn't have a lot of screen time. But yet, when someone says they're Boba Fett, all of a sudden it's just amazing. I mean, what to you, even before going into that shot, I mean, what did it mean to you? And just knowing that I'm getting ready to follow in the footsteps of Jeremy doing this.
Well, it would have been probably more nerve-wracking had I not done the 10 hours. 10 hours rehearsal. So, I mean, I would look at, you know, John Morton's as he goes around the corner, all that little subtlety. There are no corners in Docking Bay 94, so I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
But I did look at Jeremy's walk on Bespin. I used that kind of slow walk with the hard selling carbonite. Just because I thought that's a good pace because it's not walking like he's threatened by anyone.
Yeah.
Or he's in a hurry, and that he's in control. So I thought that'd be a good pace to mimic. And so that's what I based it upon. That first shot, the walk in, the start point, finish point. And I had I not done that, 10 hours in the suit, I probably would have been more nervous. But I felt so comfortable in it at this point.
Yeah.
I was comfortable with the blast. I was comfortable with the suit. I knew exactly how much mobility I had. It was the same suit. It still had the bells on the wrong side. I was like, what? But yeah.
So you talked about kind of like you mentioned sort of looking at previous portrayals of the character. So you had done all that prior to your 10 hours of the suit at those events?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many times I've watched Star Wars. It's ridiculous. I don't know. I really don't know. Like hundreds and hundreds. And before that, before they had the VHS, which I taped off the TV show in first because you couldn't get it. Before that, I had the long plan record, and it was a 12-inch album, two-sided, and it had mostly sound bites from the movie. Very little narration needed to string together all these scenes in sound bites. So you had like an audible version of the movie. I just wore that thing out. I had to replace it. I got a second one and wore that out as well. But I'd play that on loop, and I'd be drawing all day with this Star Wars looping in the background. I'd just be listening to it over and over again.
So when they did your blue screen shot, did you know that was pretty much going to be the only scene for you, or were you hoping to see more? Did they actually film more, and then it never made it? So those are some of the questions I've always wondered on that. And
they showed me the 2 plates, and they explained what was going to happen. They had it on a playback machine, so they could actually see me and the plate and fade between the two and see like half and half, So they had to reproduce or try and guess at the height of the camera. This is Steve Williams and crew. They did a phenomenal job just trying to find that sweet spot where the camera must have been so high with this lens on it to capture what it did, because all the camera data from New Hope got trashed or lost or burned or destroyed, or it wasn't around. They didn't have it. All that stuff's documented, so in case you have to do a reshoot. So they had to guesstimate this, and that's why it took so long. So I was like walking that walk, I don't know, like at least 50 times before that we started rolling cameras. Just because they had to do not just the height of the camera and the lens of the camera, but also the light. They wanted the light to, this is Joe Laturi doing all the lighting. But he rigged it so that it looked like I was in that same volume as the original actors, with the same ambient and bounce and rim. And so it looks, when I saw the first dailies and they showed me there was like 11 takes, and I couldn't believe I was in Docking Bay 94. It just was like, wait a minute, I was on a blue screen, but now it looks like I'm actually in front of the Falcon, crazy. And George picked take 11, which is my lucky number. So
nice. So obviously we see a few pictures here of you with the green or the blue screen behind you and stuff. So what was the obviously you said they had to adjust you to certain spots and everything, but what was the prep like? And then was it hard to get used to? Were you familiar with blue screen work before, or was this kind of your first go at it?
This is my first go at it because I started as a pencil and paper animator, and I got hired into ILM as a pencil and paper animator. They thought it'd be quicker to teach us the software in 3 weeks than to try and get a software or technical guy to learn animation over 3 years, So I was part of this big experiment that ILM did, hiring for specifically Casper, because they needed a crew of about 30 animators. And back then there were no CG animators. CG animation was just done by guys that made a 5-minute film and put it into a festival, It wasn't an industry back then. They just broke it into it with, Terminator and Jurassic Park and The Abyss. Those movies are kind of broken into computer animation, but they didn't have a big crew, and suddenly they needed 30 people. So I got hired, not knowing anything technically. What was the question again? I can't
remember. We're going off on that thing again here. The
lateral brain,
prepping for the blue screen and just being.
Oh yeah. So to start your story, I had no prior film background. I did lots of theater when I was a kid. I thought I was going to either go into theater, into acting, or go into art. One of those two arts. And I kind of fell into animation by accident, and I figured, well, that's a combination of the two. I'm kind of acting behind my characters, like Aladar in Dinosaur. I'm kind of acting, or like Casper in Casper. I'm doing the acting, but through him. So, is that bad? When he's on the talking to Christina Ricci and stuff like that, and I copy what my facial expressions are. So I figured animation was a combination of the two, but someone had to tell me how to use the blue screen. They showed me my start position, they showed me on my end position, but be looking, this way. So you've got as probably very limited visibility, lots of condensation, ruining everything you can see. And they had a piece of tape that showed kind of the last the very top corner of the ramp of the Falcon. So that's where Han and Chewie would have disappeared to. So you'd kind of be looking that direction. That was for the second scene more, but yeah, it was all new to me, and they kind of just walked me through it while they're setting up, and then we shot, and maybe went for about, I'd say about 10 to 15 takes of that first shot. The awkward thing about that first shot was that they didn't have a really clear, because of the angle. I'm at an angle with Jabba, slightly off, not straight onto camera, and because the gun didn't have much of a silhouette. It was pointed at camera. So Steve was like, "Can you crank it round to the side?" So I was like, "Okay, like that," which felt awkward. And he goes, "No, further." I was like, "Okay, yeah, walk like that." So I just try and do a Jeremy kind of walk, but like with my arms like around to the side. And I thought this is going to look awful, and it didn't. But I expected it would, or might. But they said, you have to trust the people behind the camera because you can't see. There's nobody said to me on that day, "Hey, it looks like you're looking down the camera." Does it? Does it? Well, I'll change it then. But no one said that. And even though I was looking this way, that T just lines up with the camera. But no one said anything. So people say, why'd you look in the camera? I didn't, but George fell in love with the fact that he said only Boba Fett would mug the camera. And so if he loves it, then I love it.
So obviously playing. Oh, go ahead, Travis.
I was going to ask. You said it took 11 takes. How long was that? Like all in one day that spread across multiple days?
Yeah. We did morning. The morning we did the first shot, and then afternoon we did the second shot.
Okay, yeah, because it sounds like in between each shot there was a lot of.
They had to find a new camera position.
Each shot probably took a few minutes, but the actual setup in between each one probably took quite a bit of time to change the lighting, the cameras, and everything.
Yeah, when it comes to heavy equipment, it always you can't get that done in a few minutes. It's like a half an hour to an hour process to kind of get everything turned around, specifically to try and light for that shot and to shoot for that shot.
So when you don this armor, obviously the amazing Boba Fett armor, you're now in this amazing fraternity of people. Jeremy, Morton, Dickie. We can keep going. Alan Harris, Daniel. Prototype. We can just keep rolling the list of some of these. I've asked this to every one of you guys that I've talked to, but I think it's just amazing to hear your thoughts on it. Obviously Fett was popular when you guys did the special edition, but did you think talking with all your Fett fraternity, did you see him growing the way it did to today to where he would get his own show?
No, because I really thought that I was kind of unique in my choice, because I didn't like, my favorite character wasn't Luke Skywalker. It wasn't Han Solo. It wasn't Chewbacca. It wasn't Darth Vader. It was Boba Fett. Like you said, this guy that had very little screen time. It's like, so I thought I was kind of like a bit weird, and I didn't care. But that was my favorite character. And then it's just been amazing to find that millions of people have chosen him as their favorite character. Millions, it became evident when the Kenner action figure came out. That's when it suddenly went off that, wow, he's so popular. And his popularity was his fate, because George suddenly got worried because this bounty hunter was more popular than his hero character. So that's why he got rid of him at the beginning of the next movie. I got to get rid of him. That's why Jedi will always have this kind of crushing feeling for me, because I went into Jedi really wanting to see what Boba Fett was going to do next.
Yeah.
And the movie, for me, partly ended with the Sarlacc pit moment. I was like, I was absolutely floored at that moment. And so that has always resonated ever since. So Empire is my favorite of the three. Has to be because he's in it, and it just was. It was so dark and moody, and broke all the rules. It really felt like the Empire has a might to it now. You know, it isn't just a pushover. It isn't just a group of guys that can be outsmarted by a small, you know, one-man fighter. You know, they're going to get their payback now, like they did.
And
So,
speaking of Kenner, real quick, I know some of you guys saw Jim, who popped his message up earlier. If you guys are familiar with the Kenner world, Jim's name is pretty famous with Kenner.
The toy father. The toy father. And Jim wasn't at that Kenner. I have Jim, if you're still watching, I was going to send you an email, because if you know anyone who was, maybe they got pictures of that night. Maybe.
But yeah,
Jim just got back from Antarctica, lucky.
Yeah, Jim's a great guy. Great, always talking with him. You know, met him a few times down in Nashville and stuff. And but yeah, just this, you know, thinking of the popularity and going into this, and we're going to get into the meat and potatoes here now, because I know people are wanting to hear about this, and you know, and talking about some of the stuff that, as Boba Fett fans, you know, Mark, I was the same way with you. You know, I was, you know, the toy, once I got that Boba Fett toy when I was a kid, it was all over. That was the coolest thing ever. I didn't care about Luke. I didn't care about anybody else. It was Boba Fett. This thing's amazing. I don't even know what he's going to do, but this is awesome. Yeah. So we get, you know, we lose him at the time. We don't know if he's still alive in the Sarlacc pit. You know, we get, you know, his books, you get comics. And then we get the Clone Wars. You know, we get younger Boba Fett, we go Daniel Logan. And then all the popularity, and finally all these rumors, you know, we get the Mandalorian. And I know we've had this discussion about it, and we'll get into that. But then we get finally the book of Boba Fett. Going into this, I was so excited, you know, especially when they did that last trailer for the Mandalorian, that last cutaway scene, and you see him. And then I won't lie, I screamed probably so loud that my neighbors probably called the cops in the Mandalorian when Slave One started flying across the screen, and all of a sudden it was game over. I will say I kind of screamed a little bit when I heard when he was walking in the desert, you could hear the, you know, the ting ting, but it was when the Slave One came across there. So I mean, how excited were you when you found out that, hey, we're finally getting a series, we're getting the book of Boba Fett? And then let's talk about what your thoughts were about it.
Well, I think there's two steps to this, because I was just excited to see him in the Mandalorian just alive, you know. So if they had ended it without the book of Boba Fett, I'd already like gotten something back that I'd lost for years since that moment I just spoke about. That 1983 moment in the cinema when he goes in the salad pit and he crushed me. Since that moment, it took that long to seeing him in episode 6 of season 2, you know, in the flesh and kicking ass, and I was like, oh my god, I've got him back. Book of Boba Fett, it wasn't what I was expecting. I was hoping for all the stories that contributed to him having the legendary status that he has, basically, in a nutshell. And if Disney want me to make that, I'll make it for them. But
did you hear that, Disney? If you're listening,
but you have to watch Book of Boba Fett, binge watch, because it's way more forgiving than watching it week to week. Week to week just destroyed it, and just for the reasons we spoke about earlier, because it was doing the whole flashback. We jump in between 2 times, but we're already jumping back to what we knew of the original trilogy, because it was kind of tying into this, and we're jumping around. It's like, oh, it was just too much. Jumping around. I would have done 4 episodes of the Tusken Raiders and made it much more gradual. Made the mods dusty at least. I mean, it's Tatooine, dusty looking. It can look scavengers or whatever, but dust. And then the rest of it kind of plays out. Even that episode 5 where we lose Boba Fett for the whole episode, if you watch it, binge watch it, it's not as jarring, because we cut to Din and then he finds Boba Fett, and then you kind of just follow it how it's supposed to go, instead of like being a week where where's Boba Fett? It's the book of Boba Fett and there's no Boba Fett, you know. And that's an interesting comment, because Greg and I have talked about this several times. He's such a huge Boba Fett fan. It's like trying to live up to that expectation. The bar he set for this series was probably unattainable to begin with. But I, for one, I did like the Tusken Raider story arc, but I had not considered kind of from a
an editing pacing standpoint, had they taken all of those and put them into their own episodes and then done it more linear in like the timeline, it would have. I think you're right. I think it would have flowed much better as opposed to 20 minutes flashback, 20 minutes real time. It was pretty jarring.
I'll say this though, they did give me. I always saw Boba Fett as being straight out of a spaghetti western. He was Clint Eastwood out of Man with No Name. So to see a spaghetti western, I did get that. So it wasn't what I was expecting, but it was the next best thing, which was a spaghetti western. And with Cad Bane in the end and the Rancor, it was like that last episode. I've maybe forgive, not having seen him basically in much of 2 episodes prior to that. So,
Greg and I've talked about this many times. I'm a huge spaghetti western fan. So to me, those last couple episodes when Cad Bane showed up and the straight out the good, the bad, and the ugly 3-way sort of showdown there with Cobb Vanth, one of my new favorite characters, and I just loved all those references. You could just tell some of the shots were just straight like Sergio Leone style. And I loved all those influences, and even the Tusken Raider and the train. I mean, that's great train robbery type stuff and wild. I mean, you can tell they pulled a lot of Western influences into the Book of Boba Fett, which I personally really appreciated being a big Western fan.
Yeah, and me too. That's the other thing, is that it gave me the next best thing. I'm trying to. I can't.
We'll bring Jim's comment back here in a minute.
It gave me the next best thing. It wasn't what I was expecting. So, but when I got over the shock of it not being what I was expecting, I realized that it's playing out very much like a spaghetti western. So, I really love it, and I've grown to love it because the more you watch it, the more you kind of like forgive. Episode 3 still is hard to get through, but
I'll have to do that now. I have not gone back to it since the original week to week, and then Greg we would jump on and talk about each episode each week. But I think I'm going to do that sometime. I'm going to go back and kind of watch it straight through, because I know we're not talking about Andor, but Greg and I had a very similar experience with Andor, that when I watched the first 3 episodes that they released together, which I'm glad they did, I think it was much better. Trying to put myself in the shoes. If I watched one episode, missed a week, watched another, it's like, no, sometimes they drag out the story across so many episodes that you lose something, but if you watch them all together, it does feel a bit more cohesive.
It does, because I'm a filmmaker, so you put a shot in to give your audience a piece of information. If they suddenly get the information and it cuts away, like it's just a snippet, a detail, cuts away to something else, the episode ends, and then you got to wait a week. You're never going to remember that 3-second shot that was vital for all that next stuff to make sense. So the week to week kind of destroys a lot of these series, and they always play better if you just. That's the best thing about having COVID. I just watched everything.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm gonna bring Jim's comment back up here in a minute, and I'm gonna kind of piggyback on it a little bit. So we talk about the Book of Boba Fett, and one of my biggest disappointments was kind of how he was portrayed in this book. Knowing like from the past, I mean, we didn't have a lot of information, but he was always that, that badass, that person that we were, doesn't listen to anybody, wasn't scared of Vader, wasn't, this is the way I do it, and this is the way it's going to be done. Then he kind of gets into that, in the Book of Boba Fett, he takes over, is trying to be the town's marshal, the town's, very lovable mayor. And one of my biggest pet peeves with this whole thing was the end when they did that like 19 montage fadeaway shot where they're all laughing and whatever. I don't know why that bugged me so much, but he did seem very soft. And you go to the Clone Wars after his Django gets killed, and then you got the Clone Wars series, it's animated. But man, Boba Fett he was a kid and he's trying to get on the Star Destroyers, kill Mace Windu, do all this stuff, and it was just awesome. So when I thought the Book of Boba Fett, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a continuation from him still being just ticked off at everything and ready to go. And then of course Jim's comment, Boba in the Book of Boba Fett seems to be softer when he was in the pit. Witness his father being beheaded by the Jedi and then turned pretty soft-hearted. So, that to me was one of my biggest disappointments. And then Mark, I'll let you talk about this a little bit, because in prior talks we've had this discussion. The Mandalorian was what we wanted, that we thought was going to be our book of Boba Fett. So I'll let you talk about your thoughts on that.
I mean, you just said it in a nutshell, but following that, all I wanted to see in the book about Boba Fett was for him to do something like we'd seen Din Djarin been doing for 2 seasons. And instead they kind of stuck him stranded on Tatooine for the whole thing, more or less. I just wanted them to see him go about a bounty hunt and show that's why, kind of like what we'd seen in episode 6 of season 2 Mandalorian when he turns up, but that was without his gear. I want to see him with his gear, just go at it and just show us kind of like what Din Djarin did aboard the prisoner ship. Just show us why he's got that reputation. And we never did. And all of a sudden he's like giving up being a bounty hunter. And I was like, that's what defines him as being the character I fell in love with. He was a bounty hunter. And so when I realized we're going to get a season of him, not doing that, it was like, I felt robbed a bit of, I hope they do something. If, like I said, if you want me to do a Legends of Boba Fett Disney, I'll do it. I'll make it for you. I'd just like to see how he interacted with, other characters, like how he came into contact with Dengar, how he first encounter with Bosk, first encounter with younger Han Solo, maybe, or something, it isn't what I was expecting, but it wrapped up what it did, because that 3rd episode in, I was really worried. And 4 kind of brought me back a bit from the precipice, because 4 was the Slave One episode. So I was like, it just saved me from the edge. And actually, me and Jim were in Austin just as that Slave One episode came out. So I went to Austin, Texas with Jim. With that, I was watching that in my little hut at night. Just replaying that episode 4 over and over again, because it saved me from, I was just in dismay at the whole mods and Vespers thing. It just, I wish I wasn't. I really thought I was going to be in dismay about everything until they made the first Mandalorian. And suddenly I thought, I'm not one of those guys that is going to hate everything that isn't the original trilogy. This is stuff that I really do love. And the prequels have really grown on me a lot as well. So,
and being old school, like ourselves, and looking back at some of the stuff, and like how you said, like with Dengar and all that, we know in the Rise of Skywalker that he changed his name. He, like, even in the Star Wars encyclopedias, they hint that that's him. That he modded himself because he didn't want to die and he always wanted to be a bounty hunter. And that would have been the greatest opportunity for them to merge the mod guys in with him, saying that he's been working with him. So I think that was a huge opportunity they missed out on. But just you're like, there's other bounty hunters that I would expect that we would see, and we didn't. But again, what I think, and this is what we'll go in the Mandalorian a little bit too, is hopefully they redeemed it and kind of see what some of the old school fans wanted, because now, and if you disagree with me, let me know with this, but now we know Boba Fett's done being the mayor. He doesn't want to do it anymore. I think he's going to hand it over to Cobb Vanth, and he's going to take that. And I personally think he's going to pair with Mando, and we're going to see this crazy on Mandalorian with Bo-Katan and everybody else, the armorer who claims that he's not a Mando anymore. So that, the Mandalorian show that we want, I really think is really coming now at us. Do you think we're going to see a big role of Boba Fett in there, or is it going to be kind of like, this is Mando's show, Bobo, you're not in charge of anything anymore. You're now the sidekick.
I really hope so. I really hope that now we get to see them both kind of like show what 2 guys can do by themselves with no help, and just see Boba Fett show some of what we thought we knew him as in the original trilogy. like the very first episode he gets beaten up, I think, in the town, and has to go in the back to tank, and then he ends up having to keep going back in there. He keeps getting beaten up, and it's like, what happened to him? Maybe, I don't know what happened. I was trying to get on board quicker than I could. And it took me a while to get on board. Like I said, it took me till probably episode 4 when we had Slave One on the Sarlacc, moment.
Yeah,
right, and that's the one thing I think that is interesting and gives me a lot of hope is, I think as soon as we saw Boba Fett show up in The Mandalorian, and Ahsoka did as well, and then The Mandalorian and Ahsoka and Luke all show up in the Book of Boba Fett, they're kind of taking a page out of the Marvel MCU style thing to where, hey, this is one sort of universe. Characters will show up in each other's, solo series and things. It's kind of like sort of building up like their little Avenger squad, to kind of Greg's point, to where we have, Boba can help out Din Djarin now. You've got Finnick there. You've got Bo-Katan. You have all these characters you've introduced in the different series, and now they can kind of overlap and hopefully do a little bit more off-world. You made a comment earlier about Book of Boba Fett taking place just on Tatooine. Like, I assumed that Boba was eventually going to leave Tatooine and go off to other planets and do different things, but he was just stuck in one town essentially for the entire series, which was kind of surprising. So hopefully now that he's left Tatooine behind for bigger and better things, he can get to some badassery.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I was lucky enough to be I was working 2010. This was on the first Avengers movie, and I heard Victoria kind of roll out her big epic plan for the Marvel movies for the next 12 years, and I was just like, my jaw just hit the floor. I couldn't, at the time, I couldn't understand how we could do a movie with so many heroes in it, because Avengers was the first time we pulled a lot of these characters together, and it was really epic to hear her long time plan, and it kind of echoes what you just said about that now they're kind of like doing that with the Star Wars universe, and like I said, making it more like a bigger believable galaxy.
Now, do you think with all this? I mean, obviously, myself and you and a lot of other people, we like the old school stuff. Like, we want to see more old school stories, but we're also getting to a newer generation. I mean, do you see and I'm starting to feel this way, especially, with no big movies on the slate or anything right now. I mean, do you think this is going to be pretty much kind of the last big mixture with some of the old stuff before we go into straight just new content of, this is no more Luke, no more of this, family line? I mean, do you see that coming here soon?
I mean, I can understand why they want to kind of maybe depart from the hero characters a bit, but I still would love to have more movies centered around that time period still. That the war is still going on between the rebellion, who's a minority, and the big empire. I'd rather still be exploring other stories that are happening during that kind of period, rather than kind of going far into the future like the sequels kind of did, or far into the past like the prequels did. I think because the Mandalorian is so close to that time period, that's why it did so well. We're still in that remnants of the empire. We can relate to it. It's still part of what we cherish, or what we cherish the most, which is the original trilogy. So I think that's where Mandalorian did a smart thing. It kind of brought us back to those aliens and those times and those ships and those stormtroopers. My biggest disappointment in the Force Awakens was the changing of the stormtrooper uniform. If they kept that, then it would have felt more like a continuation for me personally. That's only one detail I would change if there's like a magic button you can push where the computer digitally puts stormtroopers in. I'd buy that copy.
And Jim, we all agree the bounty hunters need to unite, because that's what's going to keep this series going pretty hardcore for us. But yeah, it's just I just see all that, and then just I'm hoping, like I said, I'm hoping we see team up with Mando and Boba Fett going into that. But it just seems like I'm getting worried a little bit. And I'm going to ask you the big question because everybody knows my opinion on this. Grogu. Let's talk a little bit about little baby Yoda here. I mean, do you think we're going to get him become like a full-fledged Mandalorian? Is he going to be this like? His story's got me confused. I mean, throw a curveball. You know,
I mean, I'm assuming it's going to take a long time for him to mature to that point. Anyway, it's another 50 years at least. You know, so I don't know. I can't see it happening within Mando's lifetime.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's kind of just funny because I laugh a little bit because I mean, if you look at all the Star Wars stories, you know, you start with this, you know, Luke when he was young, you know, you got Ezra and Star Wars Rebels, you know, you got Ahsoka, then you got, you know, and it's all that story. But it's Grogu. I just cannot figure out where they're going to throw this little guy. You know, is he going to become the next, you know, the second ever Mandalorian Jedi?
He doesn't need to change. He doesn't need to change. They just keep throwing Grogu at us. I can't get enough of that guy. I don't want him to change. I
don't know, man. I was kind of I'm the opposite a little bit because I was like I wanted more because I was worried with Mando the first season. I'm like I don't want him to keep babysitting this kid. I want him to go be a Mandalorian and go fight. You know, this is what I want. So you know when that that scout trooper caught Grogu, I was kind of a scout trooper fan at that point. But
shame on you.
You know, there's so much coming at us, and I'm so excited for the next season. And I know we're running out a little bit of time tonight. So a couple more questions here to ask. Alex, also thank you for watching tonight. Michael as well. Michelle, thank you for your comments. But just, one of the most important questions, and I promise I won't tell Dickie who wore the suit better. I mean, who's the best looking Boba Fett under the armor?
You asking me that? You're seriously asking me who's the best?
Who's the best Boba Fett? Is it? Obviously Jeremy is the legend, but who's the best Boba Fett?
I mean, it has to be Jeremy. Jeremy's the Boba Fett godfather. I mean, Jeremy isn't just everyone thinks of just Boba Fett, but he is responsible kind of for the modern day Comic-Con. He started the Men Behind the Masks, which got tagged along with comic conventions and grew into what he's owed a lot more things than being Boba Fett, but he is the Boba Fett godfather for me. And I'm so privileged to have not just met him, for him and I to know each other, just to be recognized and acknowledged and kind of taken under the wing a bit. He took me under the wing in London when I was in the 2017 London Comic Con, and he said, he goes, you got to be cool. If you're going to be a Boba Fett, you got to be cool. Are you cool, Mark? Are you cool? I said, yeah. I'll try and be cool for you, Jeremy. He goes, you got to be cool, people. As long as you're cool, that's just my one request. So, but it just was such a gentleman. Him and Alan Harris.
Yes,
are my two favorites. So I put them both up there.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to meet Alan right before he passed, and then obviously Jeremy I've met a few times, and talking with them, and great people. Their stories are just amazing, and it's just and I can speak for a lot of us, getting to talk to you and the other people who worked with Star Wars and don the Boba Fett armor as a Boba Fett fan. It's a fraternity of you guys that is just it's amazing. Just hearing your stories and when you're talking about walking in there and being seeing this crates full of Star Wars stuff and putting on the helmet, and I just could never imagine what that would be like.
No, it's awesome to
hear that. But so I guess the last question we'll ask you tonight then is, what is your prediction for Mando season 3? Are we going to see Mandalorian just keep that dark saber and be the king of Mando or the Mandalorians, or what do you think is going to happen? What's your
I don't know. I mean, I'm purposely not looking at anything. I didn't want to look at the trailer. I don't want to see anything. I want to go in. It's funny, I can only do that with Star Wars. Any other thing, I don't really care if I see the trailer or not. But when it comes to Star Wars, I'm very anti-trailer. I don't want to see anything going on. I don't want to hear too many opinions of what people think going in. I want to just form my own opinion and be true to it,
Mhm.
But I don't know. I wouldn't like to say. I mean, that whole dark saber conundrum is a problem, which made itself clear at the end of last season. But
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd like to see Din become the mayor next. The mayor of Mandalore. Not that he's the mayor, but kind of we saw the whole Boba Fett become the Daimyo.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I don't want to see that again. I'm hoping he'll find some way to loophole it so that he can hand it over, because give it to the person that wants it,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It'll
think
definitely it'll be interesting. I'm excited. We got to finally see a little bit of the teaser, and especially at Celebration. I know Travis got to see the trailer there and stuff. And I'm with you. I try to stay, and it's hard, especially since I work with media. It's hard to stay away from some of these spoilers. Or sometimes I'll get an email, and I'm like, I'll email back like I'm not reading this, because that's unfortunately the Rise of Skywalker got spoiled for me that way, because I was sent something like, hey, can you write about this, and it ended up being part of the script, and I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me, So I kind of watch that too on there, and I try to stay away from many big spoilers as I can. But Mark, we want to thank you so much. We want to thank everybody today. Jim, thank you. It's good having you on here. Jim, we'll have to get you on a show someday and talk some Kenner. Michael, thank you. Alex, Michelle, we were glad you're here. Make sure you check out our sponsors, TRG Toys and Collectibles, trgtoys.com. You can follow Travis and myself at the #show, #show.com on all social media. You can follow me and Travis at our little handles there, NerdyVet574, Indiana Salone. Mark Anthony Austin is all over social media. Where can they follow you at, Mark?
Either my name, or I have two Facebooks. Mark Austin is the one that's open to anybody and everybody. And otherwise, at Boba Fett ANHSE stands for A New Hope Special Edition.
So again, thank you, everybody. We had a great time tonight, and it was an honor to have one of the Boba Fetts here on the show. I mean, you probably can't tell I'm a little bit of a Boba Fett fan. There's a couple things in the background. I mean, not a lot, but there's a couple little things here and there. And I'm sure there's and the art, and there's another thing too. Oh my gosh, I forgot to bring up Mark's amazing artwork here. And you know what? Just before we leave, folks, I want you guys to see this. If you've never seen any of the work that Mark has done, obviously there's some in the background, but not only is he talented with animation, acting, he's also a brilliant artist. And I've watched him do some of his stuff on Facebook Live, and like it's amazing. And Mark, I mean, the stuff you do is just it deserves to be in the gallery.
Well, that's the aim. I'm trying to get enough pieces to have a show.
But yeah, just you guys check him out. Check him on social media. Look at his stuff. You might think that I'm crazy, but no, seriously, just look at this stuff, because it's amazing. I mean, to me though, I can't even draw a stick figure, so I mean that's even more impressive than what he's doing than that I could never ever do. So again, Mark, awesome. It's so good to have Boba Fett here on our show tonight. And a great fraternity of great Boba Fett actors. I can't wait to see you again. We'll have to pour a cold one again, and until next time, everybody, be safe. We can't wait to see us. Whoever's going to Star Wars Celebration, we can't wait to see you there. And until then, may the Force be with you.